This is ground control to Major Tom. Okay, here we go. Time to begin. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way. You didn't know you were going to get me singing today, did you? It's for the countdown, ground control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. I forgot to do the countdown, so I thought I would sing that instead. That's a good way to do it. Now, listen, guys, here's the deal. This thing is not coming through with all of my platforms. So in some ways it is, but in other ways it's not. So the messages are not coming through every time during the live sessions, I don't think. I think there's only a couple of options for the messages. So if you have written me a message before and I haven't seen it on here, I'm trying to work that out. I think I'm switching over to Streamlabs. It's the same thing as OBS, what I've been using, but Streamlabs seems to be, I don't know, just more, not more versatile, but more functional and more easy to use, more easy to figure out why it is that maybe, and maybe it'll give me just one place. I haven't looked at it enough. I did subscribe today, but I'm going to look at it this week and switch over to that, and Streamlabs may be the way for us to go. We'll just try that out. I do like OBS. It does work for us, but we'll switch to Streamlabs probably eventually. So anyway, okay, let's see here. If we got everything, I forgot to light the candles. Oh well, that's all right. I like the candles. They're cool. Let us get started. This is what, 2022. And as you guys can see, I've renumbered everything everywhere. I think everywhere, at least on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, and I don't know what it'll look like on, yeah, that's true. I got to Spotify and all that. I may need to rethink the numbering system there. But anyway, Spotify is easy. The podcasts are already easy to be able to go in order. I'm just trying to make it really easy for you to go in order on YouTube if you want to get caught up. Another thing that we're going to be doing is I'm going to keep it on YouTube for the daily broadcasts. And I'm going to edit those daily broadcasts, put them up each day just like I've been doing. But on Saturdays, I'm going to try to put together all 5 broadcasts that we did during the week and have a separate one where you have the option of just clicking one button and getting caught up in, 3.5 hours. So it'll be a 3.5 hour long one that will cover all of them that we've done all week. That'll be pretty cool. That'll be helpful, I think. Okay. Let's get started. Welcome to session 21 of Theology Unplugged. This is our special Through Theology in a Year broadcast. It's session 21 of the Through Theology in a Year, not session 21 of Theology Unplugged, because we've been doing Theology Unplugged since 2005. If we've only done 21 episodes, that wouldn't be very, very good. Been kind of lazy. But no, this is just 21 from the Through Theology in a Year. Thank you for joining us. As you know, as you may not know, we're going through all of theology in 1 year. I'm trying this out. I'm not going that fast right now. I'm not really sure what it's mapped out like. In my mind, I've got it all mapped out, but we'll see how it goes in practicality, because like today's lesson was not even ever in my mind. This is a whole new way of looking at it. It was in my mind as far as conceptualization. As a teacher, you've always got things going on. You're always building things, especially somebody who is left-handed like me. I'm always building charts. So I've got charts in my mind. That's how I know theology, is through charts. If there wasn't charts, I wouldn't know a thing about theology. So that is the way, that is what I'm doing now. And so it's working out, I think. just like it should, but I don't know whether it will go a year or longer. What I can do is after I get through the first time, then I can kind of structure it better and see what all was included, what all maybe didn't need to be included, and then try to get it down to a year. And then the next year, depending on how it goes, then I can do the whole thing again and keep on getting it more and more structured. But here's the deal. For a lot of you all, you've got the theology program. You've been through the theology program. Remember, this is based upon a 60-session course called the Theology Program. It's 6 courses put together called the Theology Program, 60 sessions, 10 sessions per course. And you can find that at credocourses.com. If you go to credocourses.com, there's a link to it oh great, I don't have that up again. But if you go to credocourses.com, there you just search for it, the Theology Program. And there'll be this, I would say get it, if you're going to get it on the thumb drive, or just become a patron of if you become my patron, patreon.com/C Michael Patton, Patreon. That is it. Let's see if I can get that to come up real quick. I might be able to. I think I tried this last time. It didn't work, but let's go ahead and do it again. Let's see. Okay, Patreon logo. Nah, it didn't work. Oh well, I'll have to try to edit that out. Maybe I just don't care. Maybe that's okay. But anyway, going to patreon.com/C Michael Patton, or just search C Michael Patton's Patreon. You'll find it there. If you become a member there, then you can get the entire theology program as well. You can get it downloadable kind of instantaneously to you. But there's all kinds of ways to get the theology program. But there's a lot of people who are using this at their church. They're using it as their curriculum to disciple members through a very in-depth level of theological training. It's a great option. It has workbooks, has PowerPoints, has videos, everything. They're a little bit outdated I recorded them back in 2000 to 2006. That's whenever I originally recorded them and created them. And of course, I'm so much smarter now and got so much more information that I need to give. I'm updating it. It's really pretty much the same, folks. It's just better. We're doing better graphics, that kind of thing. So if you go through that program, you can teach it. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to create also something for those of you who have been teaching this for years, to kind of get some more background in every single session, so that whenever you go in to teach this or small group lead it, watch the videos and small group lead it, you'll be more prepared to help people through. And that's what this is all about, discipling people in theology, getting deeper than possibly you ever thought you could go outside of seminary. That's what we're trying to provide here. So that's what we're doing through Theology in a Year. That's how it fits into the big picture of Credo House Ministries. But you can also remember, besides going to become a patron, that is the primary way in which you support me, what I'm doing here. But you can go and give a tax-deductible donation if you go to credoministries.org. credoministries.org. That will lead you to the right place there. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. We are continuing our discussion, we're still on this, of the theological process. Now, what I'm going to do here today is kind of throw you a little bit of a curveball, because you've probably never seen this before, at least from me. You may have seen it, somebody else may have taught it this way, I don't know. But at least from me, you've never seen me teach, and these are all brand new slides. So hang with me as I teach through this for the first time. You guys are my guinea pigs. But I've been wanting to do it this way, and I've been wanting to conceptualize it and communicate it this way for a long time. So whenever you think about our chart that we've been going through, this particular one right here, this is a great chart. I love this chart. This is one I'm going to keep on using. This is not a replacement for this chart. This is just something that will see another way to look at the theological process and deriving our theology from the Bible. Remember, we're focused right now on saying, all right, if the Bible is our primary source, which we haven't defended yet. Somebody brought this up again to me in one of the comments. I have not defended that. I have not established that yet. We'll break that down and put it back together later on. But right now, if the Bible is our primary source for theology, how do we get theology from the Bible? That's what we're doing. That's what this is all about. We're looking at it. What did it mean? What does it mean? And then how does it apply to us? Those three questions. And today we are going to look at it a little bit differently. Remember, we're trying to, this one was concentrating on looking at it in the original authors, the authorial intent, going back to the day in which the particular passage of Scripture was written, trying to understand it the way the author intended, the way the audience would have heard it, and then unclothe that to find the timeless principles and then reclothe it for today. Now, I want to talk about a particular passage of Scripture that you all are familiar with. I'm just going to bring this up real quick, and then we'll show its relevance as we go through. It says in Matthew chapter 7, Christ says, "Why do you look at the speck that is in the eye and in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, then you will see clearly enough to take the speck out of your brother's eye." Christ was a very, you have to understand, in the day, Christ was a very revolutionary teacher. People, whenever they taught, they listened to the scribes, the Pharisees, and kind of the traditions that had been handed down to them. Christ came and taught them differently. You see, they had solidified the way that they were understanding the law of Moses, the Bible in their day, the Old Testament, how they understood it in a very particular way. And they kind of had it all mapped out how to follow the law of God. And the Pharisees were the greatest example of this, because to them, the Pharisees and the scribes were those who followed the law very well, if not close to perfect, from the commoner's perspective. And Christ comes in and really shows how nobody's doing well with the law because you're not looking at it correctly. Nobody's doing well, let's put it this way. Nobody's doing well interpreting the Bible, or very well interpreting the Bible, because you're looking at it too narrowly, too reductionistically. And Christ comes in and presents a whole new way of looking at it. They may have been looking at the speck the very particular way in which they thought they were to follow the law, and saying, hey, you're not following the speck that we know you are supposed to follow, whenever they have a multitude of things that they are doing wrong themselves that have to do with that same principle. Now let's get into this. Okay, so we're going to start right here with this. This is called the hermeneutical funnel. I don't know if there's ever been a hermeneutical funnel before. This is the way that I have thought of it. There's been what's called the hermeneutical spiral, which is not really the exact same thing I'm talking about here. That's Grant Osborne's book, but this is called the hermeneutical funnel. And the hermeneutical funnel is basically another way to conceptualize finding the principles that the Bible speaks about. And I think you'll enjoy it. I really do. So let's walk through this. The hermeneutical funnel. Okay, so notice here, I've got another little deal here on the left-hand side, the hermeneutical funnel. Oh, for those of you who are just listening to this is, again, I feel sorry for you because I teach through charts. You know that. I will try to keep on explaining things so that if you're on your way to work or on your way back, you have no way to watch this. I'll try to explain it. I may forget sometimes, forgive me. But right now we're basically looking at an upside-down pyramid that's cut into 4 sections. And they're kind of different colors, but it's called the hermeneutical funnel. And as you get further down to the point on the pyramid, as you get further down, you get more of the specific context. So down all the way to the point, that is kind of, if you can think of it, the speck in the brother's eye that everybody was looking at. All the scribes and Pharisees were criticizing people for having that speck in their eye, because they didn't have that speck in their eye. They were able to keep that speck out of their eye. But as you go back up the pyramid, upside down pyramid, as you go back up it, you principalize what is being said in the scripture, and then all of a sudden you find there's multiple ways in which we have camels in our eye. So it's not just a speck, the tip of the upside down pyramid, or the funnel, the bottom of the funnel. All the way throughout the entirety of the top of the funnel, we have the same principle that is applying, but we have to discover what that principle is. So basically the same thing we talked about before. So Jesus, as I said, used this method. This is whenever I read Jesus in the in Matthew chapter 5 through 7, this is where I see this is where I learned it. I mean, I think so. I mean, whenever Christ talked, this is where this funnel came up in my mind, because he was always driving people deeper into the scriptures. He was always basically saying, you see it this way, but it's really this way. You see it this way, but it's a lot bigger than what you see. So let's get to some passage. Let's get to the first passage here. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 through 28. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. Okay, good, right? You shall not commit adultery, of course. I mean, that's what we haven't done. We have not committed the specific act of adultery. Let's speak of the scribes and the Pharisees. Well, of course, I mean, I've never committed adultery, is what the scribes and the Pharisees say. And a lot of the people maybe said that too, who all thought they were kind of doing pretty well in the law. And so Jesus said, you have heard it said that. He's not saying it's not true. He's just saying, let me tell you a little bit more about that, because you shall not commit adultery is the seventh commandment. They would have known this very well. They would have tried to follow by this. They would have wanted others to see that they're following by this. But Jesus says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And I mean, this would have just shocked everybody, right? I mean, here's the commandment, you shall not commit adultery. I've gone my whole life without committing adultery. I've never cheated on my wife. I've never slept with a woman who is married. Doing good, right? That's kind of what they thought. Seventh commandment, check. Kind of like we do sometimes whenever we were talking about the first and the second commandment. Check, easy. Don't have any other gods, no problem, right? But it's bigger than that, right? Remember how we showed having no other gods is not simply having these deities that we bow down before and worship on a certain day of the week, and we are committed to going to, that's our religion. It is much bigger than that. The principle is much bigger. Christ is saying the principle is much bigger than just the act of sleeping with another man's wife, or being married and sleeping with someone who is not your wife. Okay, so here's what we have here, what Christ is doing. Again, we have the funnel, and at the bottom of the funnel, down to the very specific context, we have the actual command, you shall not commit adultery. But at the very top of the funnel here's what Christ is saying, wait a minute, you have not broken this little bottom part, but what about the top part? Looking at a woman with lust, because that's still part of the same command. He's not saying that all the commands are that one is equal, that all sins are equal. Sometimes people get this really mixed up and think that Christ is saying all sins are equal at this point. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that just because you have not committed the most specific context, the worst ideal, the worst example of this commandment, doesn't mean you're not breaking the commandment. Because if you look at a woman with lust, you are still breaking the seventh commandment. That is what Christ is saying. So let's go back to this. So what else would we have here? Well, you would say this is the seventh commandment. The entire funnel from the very tip, you shall not commit adultery, all the way up to the widest part of the funnel is still breaking the seventh commandment. That is what Christ is saying. So everything in between. So in this particular commandment, what I have here is I have on the very tip, you shall not commit adultery. At the very top, don't look at a woman with lust, the broadest part of the principle. And then maybe somewhere in the middle, you shall not commit fornication. That would be another aspect. And so what would this be talking about then? What is Christ trying to say from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel? You shall not break. That is what the seventh commandment is. What is he trying to say? Well, he's trying to say this is about sexual purity. Okay, it's not just about one aspect of sexual purity. You've got to understand that God was trying to get us to see each one of these principles in the broadest possible sense and the narrowest possible sense. He wanted to see the whole thing, but we in our sinfulness say, yeah, you know what, God, which one of these do I actually have to follow? The one at the tip? Is that what you're talking about? Can I just do the one at the tip, the very bottom, the most specific one, and am I covered? Jesus comes in and says, no, the entire thing from beginning to end, from top to bottom, the seventh commandment is what God is calling on us to do. So now at this point, everybody in the crowd's looking at this. They're not looking at this chart, but they've got something visualized like this, hopefully, and they say, wait a minute, if that's true, if the seventh commandment is that big, if the principle itself is sexual purity, then I am in trouble. And Christ would say, gotcha. That's exactly what I wanted you to see. Because you think you're self-righteous, you think you got it, until you realize how sinful you are, how deep your depravity runs, you will not ever know why I have come to die on this cross, why it was necessary for me to come. And that's where their biggest problem was at that time. I mean, they wouldn't know why they would need Christ, because they're doing pretty well at keeping the tip of the funnel. Okay, now, next one. Okay, Christ in Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 through 22 says this, you have heard it said it was said to those of old, you shall not commit murder. And whoever murders will be liable to judgment. Okay, so we got this again. We've got the very tip of the funnel, right? I mean, we're going down the funnel, and he says, you have heard it said at the tip of the funnel, you shall not actually kill somebody, right? You shall not murder somebody out of your own intent, come in and take their life. You've heard it said, and so everybody's like, yeah, that's right. I've never taken anybody's life. I'm very proud of that. Move on to the next commandment again, because that was easy. Right? Usually the very tip is somewhat easier than the broader principle, right? I mean, you get further up, and one of these times we're going to break this commandment. And Christ says, it's not just whether or not you take somebody's life for your evil intent, but I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. Wow. This would have really rocked their world, because, okay, what Christ is saying is you're not understanding the principle of this commandment. Just because at the very tip it says you shall not murder and you have not murdered does not mean you have not broken this commandment. Okay, murdering may be the worst of the breaking of the commandment. It may be the most specific example that God gave, but he wanted you to understand. He wanted everybody to understand these things deeper. He wanted all of Israel to understand this law of his, which he knew they couldn't, but at the same time, that's part of the process of progressive revelation. They had to come to know they couldn't understand it. It would never be part of who they were. But so you go over here and you say, here's the two sections. Down at the very tip of the funnel, you have you shall not murder. And then as you go up the funnel, notice here I've got do not hate others. Wow. I mean, if this is the way that this is working out to where you can't even hate anybody, or you have broken this one's the sixth commandment. If you even hate somebody, you have broken the sixth commandment, the same commandment as you shall not murder. Then we're in trouble, because we haven't really kept the command of God the way he wanted us to. He wanted us to understand the broader principle of this command. So you've got the entire eighth commandment covering everything from you shall not hate, you shall not call. I could have put it up even further and said, because I think that's what Christ did. I should have, but even up further on the funnel, the most top part of the funnel, and put calling your brother a fool. Okay, then down below it, hating him. Then down below that, you just keep on going. And this now we've got everything covered in between. Okay, so here is Christ. And the next commandment, the eighth commandment, do not hate others. And we're talking about the sanctity of life. So the sanctity of life is the principle that Christ is trying to get them to understand with this commandment. So what does this do? Let me give you a few other points in the sanctity of life. So you've got do not murder, do not hate others. But what about, let's go right in the middle there of do not murder and do not hate others. And a little less broad than do not hate others is do not physically attack someone. That may be it. Do not physically attack someone, just like you don't murder somebody, or you do not kill somebody for your own purpose or your own emotions. Do not physically attack somebody. You may not murder them. Say, well, I've never murdered anybody. I mean, yeah, physically attacked a few people. Well, did you know at that point you're breaking the fifth or sixth commandment? You are breaking the commandment, you shall not murder, because the principle of the commandment. And then finally, you've got at the very top that I think you can put it in reverse, and sometimes you can do this. At the very top, the widest part of the funnel, if you put the commandment, do not murder, in reverse, that's a good, by the way, that's a good test to see if you understand the Bible. Try to put things in reverse. Try to put all the 10 commandments in reverse. Instead of you shall not, change it to you shall. Instead of you shall, change it to you shall not. I think that's a great way to see if you understand the principle, because you can only do that if you understand this kind of funnel concept, this principle concept. You can only reverse it if you know the actual principle. So, otherwise, do not murder is saying, it's not anything, because there's no reverse to that. But if you go way up the context, you have protecting people's lives. So the sixth commandment here, the principle of the sixth commandment, the sanctity of life, would go all the way up to say we need to protect lives. Okay, it's not just a passive to where we don't kill people, but all the way up to the top, fighting for people's lives, fighting for the justice of other people. That is what is covered within this commandment. So that's what Christ is doing. He's saying you don't understand the principles. Once you get the principles down, number one, you're going to see that you've broken them all and you need me. But number two, then you'll be able to try to figure out how it is that you can begin to truly fulfill this law of God that was given. Okay, now you've got the sanctity of life, like I said, with this one. Now we move on to this slide. This slide I think is helpful, and I've got here we go. I've got the pyramid again, and as you go down to the tip of the pyramid, all the way up to the top, the funnel. Excuse me, it's a funnel. I keep on calling it a pyramid because I couldn't really find a good funnel, so I drew a pyramid and do it this way. But the funnel, at the very bottom of the funnel and at the very top of the funnel, I do not have highlighted. Those two sections in the middle I have highlighted, and I put your audience. And the reason why I put this way is because this is what in preaching class we were taught, and I think it's a very good thing to look at. Whenever you are preaching, say, on a commandment, whenever you're preaching on a principle in the Bible, normally your audience and where you need to nail them is right there in the middle, because usually they haven't committed murder, and usually whenever you get to the top, it's sometimes too broad for that particular passage. You need to find ways in which they know they have broken this. They know that they can be very specific in their own context with how they have understand the commandment, or understand the law of God, or understand the principle. And that's where you're going to find your audience. So you usually don't get too specific. Like I preach a sermon at a church, and I'm not going to, just sit there and beat up on all the murderers whenever I'm going through the sixth commandment, because I mean, there may be some there, so I may need to say something. But at the same time, there's probably not many murderers, and you get up too high on the chart, then sometimes you lose a lot of the audience. There's not a real specific way in which they can apply that to their life. So you need to be very careful with that. Anyway, that's just a little side note there that I put up here. It doesn't really have too much to do with what we're talking about. Now, here's what Christ said once again. Listen, you blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe to you, Pharisees and scribes, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. In other words, here's what Christ is saying. You define the commandment by one little piece, and then the entire commandment, the entire law is defined by that. You don't find, as long as you don't find the principle, nobody will see inside that you have broken this. And so you get to the very tip and you define it that way, and you show yourself to be righteous. And therefore you can present yourself to others as righteous. The outside of your the grave is pretty, it's got flowers on top, but the inside of the grave is ugly and full of decay. So that's the principle here. At the very specific of the command, you may have followed it, but inside you've broken it everywhere. You don't understand the principle. You don't understand how to derive principles from Scripture. That's what we're getting at here with our theology. This has to do very much with a lot of application, but whenever it comes to theology, this is the way you have to think. You have to get to the principle and understand what is being said underneath, to be able to be a good theologian and responsibly use the Scripture. Okay, now next, let's go to 2 Corinthians 3:6. I think this is another great way to see it, because it's kind of the same thing as what I'm saying here. God, who also made us adequate servants of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. You may have followed the letter of the law. The letter of the law. This is what they would do. They would interpret the Bible sometimes. There was an interpretation process in that day called letterism. And in letterism, not only did the context have meaning, not only did the sentence have meaning, not only because the Bible's inspired. If the Bible's inspired, remember, it's kind of all magic book stuff. And so they said, not only does the context have meaning, not only does the individual sentences in that context have meaning, not only do the individual words in a sentence have meaning, but now you've got the letters themselves having meaning, to the point where in that day, every jot and tittle, these were kind of like little curvatures that you put at the top or the bottom or in the middle of their letters. And, they have all their jot and tittles down. They've got all their gnats down, but they don't have the real meaning down. And so they would go down to the very letters. The letter kills, because if you just go to the letter of the law and not see the spirit of the law, if you just go to the very point of the funnel and not see the entirety of the funnel, then you are not going to see the spirit of what God's talking about, the principle of what God's talking about. God wants us to see these things in principles. That's why he wants us to be mature and know why it is that we're doing things, know why it is that things happen. I'm not saying that we're going to understand every bit of why in theology. There's a big doctrine of the mystery of God in theology. So it's not as if he gives us every principle, but generally speaking, he does want us to understand the why. He wants us to understand what is going on with the entire funnel, from top to bottom. Okay, so now we go to here. Look at this. You've got the spirit of the law up top and the letter of the law down at the bottom. They're very pointed. You get down to that little point, the letter of the law, you may be covered. But you don't know the spirit of the law, which is cover the rest. The entirety of the rest of the funnel is the spirit of the law. Here's another passage. It says Jeremiah 31:31. I think this is great for what we're talking about. Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant. This is what we just read in the New Testament in the other verse. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand and brought them out of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. But this covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord, I will put my law within them, and on their heart I will write it. And then I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Notice here, he's saying the same thing. It's that they only understood the points. They only understood the letter. They only understood the bottom of the funnel. And God's saying, I want it on your heart. I want the entirety of the funnel, you to see that at once. And that out of that principle, you begin to work. Out of that principle, you begin to see me. Out of that principle, you begin to find the application. Rather than saying, no, just tell me exactly what to do. Tell me exactly how many times I am supposed to, as a child, I am supposed to, go back and forth as I brush my teeth. How many times exactly again? That's the type of deal. And God's just saying, listen, just brush your teeth and clean it. Just make sure they're clean. Okay, it usually takes more than one, but you don't have to go 1,000. Understand the principle. It's usually more than just that one. I brush my teeth. That's the very point. And then never stopping is the upper part. It's the entirety of the thing. Just brush your teeth and make them clean. That's what God is doing. He says, I just want my law to be in their heart. I just want them to truly understand this. And to understand the funnel of the principle, everything. Okay, so you've got the new covenant right here, which is written. I have this down here. This may be not the best. I made this just right before class, but the new covenant is the entirety of the funnel, not the very tip. Okay, quickly, let's just do this. Please hang with me, okay? Just for a moment, I'm going to go through this commandment, because each one of the commandments, as we have done it on this chart, and then I'm going to go through one more commandment. So I'm going to hold you a little bit long today, but I promise I won't spend as much time on this as I have been. So let's go through and look at the first commandment with regard to this funnel. First commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. At the very bottom of the funnel, you shall have no other gods, right? And then at the very top, as you go up, do not celebrate pagan festivals. You shall have no other gods. Do not celebrate at pagan festivals. And then you keep on going up. Do not trust in your bank accounts. And then you keep on going on up. Be loyal to God. And so what is this talking about? This is talking about resting in God. That's the principle. Just rest in me. Okay, just rest in me. That's what God's saying. Just brush your teeth. Just brush your teeth. That's what I want you to do. Okay. Now go to the next one, the second commandment that we've already covered. And let's start at the very bottom. It says, you shall not make for yourself an idol. Okay, what does that mean? Do not make a physical idol of Yahweh. That's at the very bottom. That's the exact context. Do not make a physical idol of Yahweh. But what is the spirit of this? Do not ascribe God's power or action to any object. Okay, yes, okay, there we go. Now, do not think God is obligated to your plan. Whoa, okay, you see where we're going here? Do not think you are in control. Okay, this is good. Or you could just put at the very top, God is in control. So what does this mean? Well, you have the sovereignty of God. I mean, I really do think that this is what this commandment is teaching when we talk about this, the third commandment. Or the second commandment, I am in control. You are not. You shall not control me. I control you. So it's a great one to look at with regard to the sovereignty of God. Now let's look at the fourth commandment. Um, I should have done the third commandment, right? I guess I didn't put that up. Maybe I didn't think I had time. I don't remember. I just finished this up this morning. But Exodus 28 through 11, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. That's actually the entirety of the commandment is 8 through 11. But verse 8, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, very tip of the funnel, the very bottom, do not have labor on the Sabbath. As we move on up, do not engage in activities that would take away from rest. Notice here, first it's labor at the very tip. You're not going to work. Don't go to your job on the Sabbath. And then as you move on up, do not engage in activities that would take away from rest. Okay, whatever activities that would take away from rest, I don't want you to do. And you say, well, wait a minute, God. Does that mean I can't, back in their day, it was like, does that mean I can't spit on the ground? Because if I spit on the ground and my foot goes across it, it might dig a hole and be considered plowing. Is that labor? God's like, oh my gosh, you're asking me how many times should I brush the teeth? How many strokes should I make as I brush my teeth? Help me. I want you to understand it. That's what I want. I want you to do not have any labor on the Sabbath, okay? Just take the principle and let's run from there. Christ said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So we move on up, and it says, attend worship service. Well, what is this? Why do we attend worship service? Why did God call on us to look at the spiritual aspect? And we usually say, okay, as long as I go to church on Sunday, I'm good. See, we're reductionistic too, to an nth degree. We think that that's what it means, going to worship service. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but worship service is to basically take your mind off your daily activities, put your mind on the God that you rest in, and learn about Him, learn to rest in Him more. And that is why this is on the Sabbath. That's why on the Sabbath, on our rest day, we get up out of bed early and go to church. Now, again, we've reduced it. Go to church. That's it. Or just don't work. Don't do any labor. That's it. It's not really, you're not understanding. You're asking, did I brush the left-hand side, the right-hand side? I've brushed the left-hand side of my teeth. Is that good enough? Is that still considered brushing teeth? God's like, oh my gosh, you're not getting it. I want you to understand the entirety of it. Do not worry would be the broadest principle that you have here. This is just, again, notice how the first three commandments are very connected, although they're different, but they're very connected. God is He's placing Himself up and saying, I want you to understand the first four commandments are all about God, man and God, right? The last six are all about man and man. And God is setting Himself up in every single aspect as our God in the first four commandments, and us as His people. So do not worry would be this. This is just to get our minds at ease. The physical and spiritual renewal would be the principle of this commandment, I believe. And so how would this look if we took it through our old chart? This is it, I promise, and I'm done. Let's take it through our old chart. What did it mean then? Right now we're specifically talking about the fourth commandment, the Sabbath. God instructs the Israelites to set aside the seventh day, Saturday, to concentrate only on Him. Okay, good enough. Let's move up into what does it mean. God wants people to have their physical and mental rest for a significant portion of their lives. To have physical and spiritual rest, mental rest, spiritual rest, for a significant portion of your life, because 1/7 of your life is a good point. I mean, that's a lot. Take the whole day off and make sure you are resting. Now, of course, there's the daily rest that we go through, the sleep that we have to go through, but God wants you to take a willing rest on these days, taking your mind off things. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm very much one who is, I wasn't 10, 15 years ago. I wouldn't have known what I was talking about here. This would not be me. 20 years ago, really. But I didn't understand kind of mental stress and mental overload and mentally breaking. I do now. Trust me, I really, really do. I know every part about physical breaking and mental breaking now. And as I look back, I see myself as someone who never took a mental Sabbath. I was just going 100 miles an hour all the time. I was not disciplined. You would say, Michael, you weren't disciplined. You're going 100 miles an hour all the time. You were creating everything. You were doing so much stuff. Yeah, that's right. I was not disciplined. You see, discipline has to do with sometimes just stopping. And sometimes we can't stop. And what God is calling on us to do in every single way is to stop. And how do we do that? How do we stop? We're not built to stop whenever we get passionately going. And to stop, we have to go, golly, I mean, all right, I'm really going to have to concentrate on you. Lord, are you really going to, are you really going to take care of me? Am I really supposed to stop doing this? Because if I stop, here will be the consequences. And God says, let me take care of it. I just want you to stop for a little while. I want you to have a rest. Doesn't have to be that much. I'm not saying half the week you're to not work. I'm just saying take one day out of the 7 days a week and have this rest. So what is the principle, though? The principle has to do with rest. Doesn't have to do with a specific day. We talk about this many times in the New Testament. It doesn't matter about the days, the exact days, or exactly what you do on those days or at that time. Just understand rest. Just understand that is what God wants you to do. Okay, so how does that apply to us? We go back to this and we show, as followers of Christ, we are to get abundant physical and mental rest. And you can put spiritual rest in there as well, because that is part of it. That's how you get your physical and mental rest. Go to a ball game. Don't work. That could be it. Take a nap. Sometimes you guys just can't take a nap, and you feel guilty for taking a nap. Rest your mind in prayer. In other words, whenever you're praying to God, you're setting aside all of the worries and all of your problems, and you're handing them over to God. That's part of a Sabbath. That's part of giving it over to Him, casting your cares upon Him, truly doing it. We take our cares right back afterwards. We're scared to hand things over to Him. That's part of the Sabbath. Go to church and learn how to place your stress on Him. Concentrating on Him is a great Sabbath, because that's part of what a Sabbath is. So these are all the things. This is the way it looks. That was the way the funnel looks. I hope it presented you with a different way of looking at it so that we can kind of close out this section on the theological process, which, again, is this. So we can close out this section on the theological process with looking at it a different way, understanding, very much like this process today, understanding the principle of the process rather than the exact structure of the process. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining once again. I appreciate it. Hopefully this was good. You guys were guinea pigs. It's the first time, like I said, I've taught through this particular lesson, but I believe it has to do very much with the way in which the theological process works. Join us every day. We're here every day at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you can't make it afterwards, I have the video and the audio, whether it be Spotify or on YouTube, the edited audio. I have that up usually within 30 minutes to an hour. You can get it. You can listen to it anytime during the day. Don't have to join us live, but that's an option. And please, again, don't forget, if you can, that's the way I get my support. The way I can keep on going is if you can support me on Patreon. At Patreon, and I've got big vision. Those of you who know me know, about all the stuff that I want to do in respect to what I'm doing here, with respect to what I'm doing here, including, the animated theology program, an animated version of this exact thing that we're going through. And the Credo House Coffee Shop, which is kind of the headquarters, a fellowship hub, a intellectual bastion of theology that I want not only locally here, I'd love to see them everywhere and help create a model that other people can follow. But I've got a big vision, but right now I'm focusing on this through Theology in a Year. I'm also focusing on trying to get all the background work for creating the Credo House. If you guys believe in what I'm doing, once again, either Patreon or you can give tax-deductible donations at credoministries.org. Credo Ministry, Credo, credoministries.org. And you can you can really find the whole umbrella of what we're doing there. Once again, guys, I thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you every day at 9. If not every day at 9, hope that you're able to follow the principle. You don't have to follow the exact 9 o'clock. Be here at 9, or it doesn't work. Because the principle, the whole funnel, is you can watch it or listen to it at any time.